Hey team, welcome back to the Microforge. I'm Albert, and on today's video, we continue on with our Ruin Arnor terrain building series. Now today, we're going to be adding in the ruined wall sections to go along with our gatehouse that we built a few videos ago. Make sure you stick around to the end of the video where I show you how you can get your hands on some free laser cutting files so that you can cut your own MDF jigs. And for one lucky viewer, we're going to do a giveaway. So stay tuned to see how you can enter for your chance to win one of these prototype MDF cutting jigs for the battlements. Let's get into it. We want our walls to be 150mm high and 60mm thick. I want to use my Scorematic 10,000, but obviously it's not going to work for these big chunks. Out of every constraint comes an opportunity though, so I'm going to use these 10mm strips to essentially form the dressed stonework on the outside of the walls. The inside will then become kind of the fill. This will add a little bit more depth to the walls. Now, you can see here, I'm just marking out with a pencil where I want to actually cut back the ruined wall profile. I'm making sure to have a few steps along the way where models can easily climb the wall. Then I go ahead and get out the Proxxon hot wire cutter, and I just cut these two sheets of foam out together. Now that we've got our profile cut out, I come back to the larger chunk of foam. You see here, I'm shifting that 10mm strip a little bit further back. This will make the inside part a little bit recessed and give a bit more depth to the wall and provide some separation between that finished face stonework and the internal stonework of the wall itself. Again, I'm cutting this with my hot wire cutter. I don't have to be too careful because we are going to go over these pieces quite heavily and texture them up. And here you go, you can start to see the wall forming in shape, and there's some nice depth already between the outside stonework and that middle to the sandwich piece. Now, all you need to do is put on a movie, pretend to watch it, and carve out all your stonework. I've covered this a lot in the past, so if you're new to the channel, make sure you go back and check on one of our earlier videos for details on this. With the outside of the wall all carved up, now it's time to address the middle part of the wall. On the top, I'm carving in some flagstone details with a pencil and then just cutting into that with my X-Acto blade to give it a bit more depth before going back over the top with my pencil again. Now we get to the really fun part. I want to try and break up this very rigid stepped form and make it feel like it really is a piece of stonework that has crumbled and cracked and come apart more naturally. Now, if you do any research into medieval wall construction, usually there was a rubble fill in between the two layers of nice stonework. Here, I've decided to instead carve in meticulous stone detail. Now, this is probably not historically accurate. However, I think it looks cool, and it probably will also help with models actually interacting with the terrain. Having the stepped masonry look will probably enable their bases to balance on these pieces a little bit easier. And with all terrain, this is really the delicate balancing act. I've talked about it in my videos in the past, but this build really highlights the fact that when we're building terrain, we really have to straddle the line between what looks good, what looks authentic, and what our models can actually stand on and interact with, because the last thing that we want to have is our beautifully painted models tumbling around, chipping in the process, and getting damaged when we play. I found the whole process really enjoyable, even though it was really time consuming. Slowly carving away a single chunk of foam to make it feel like it's actually a whole bunch of little rocks is super satisfying. You can see here I'm starting to also carve out little chunks of the flagstones at each level. This way it gives a little bit more depth, and I'm using the fact that I have some outside dressed stonework that'll sandwich into this to really make sure that it looks quite varied and have a lot of depth in the end. It's important that you don't rush this process. Start from the top and work your way down, working between your pencil and your X-Acto blade to make sure that each layer of stonework looks and feels the right amount of ruined before you go on to the next layer. There is a bit of back and forth even after you've finished carving it all. You might see that some areas still look a little bit too pristine and you want to come back and carve in some extra details. This is very much an evolutionary process. You're not going to get it right every time, and you're not going to get it right on the first time, but if you keep at it, you will end up with something that looks amazing. And now for the moment, you can put all of the pieces back together again, and you can see how this wall, whilst it has 3 really clearly defined steps for models to stand on, it still has a lot of depth and variation and will look great on the tabletop. Now we come to the fun part. We've got this MDF jig that will help us cut the perfect battlements. This jig started life as a cardboard jig, and I sent some over to Lockie at Zorp when he was doing his Mega Minas Tirith community build. It's since evolved into something that's a little bit more robust and user-friendly. And this MDF jig will help us to crank out a whole heap of these battlements, which will look absolutely awesome. If you're keen to get your hands on this jig, I will be giving away the files for free, so you can laser cut them wherever you live in the world. Just follow the link in the description down below to our newly launched website, microforgeminis.com. The jig itself uses 3mm MDF, so as long as you've got that, then you'll be able to cut the perfect jig for yourself. And there we go. Also, stay tuned to the end of the video where I'll be giving you details on how one lucky viewer can win this as a giveaway, and we'll announce that at the end of our next video. With the jig assembled, it's super easy to cut out the battlement. Now that we've got these battlements ready, I hold it up to the foam just to see where I need to cut this back to. Always save the offcuts because it can always be used for other parts of your ruined terrain as well. Then I'm just going with my ruler and the blade to score in some lines for the stonework. And I'll cut that down to size there. That fits perfectly. Then it's just a case of texturing and weathering the edges to make it feel a little bit more authentically ruined. Always thinking about how this stonework would have been impacted through battle or even just the wear and tear of time. I want to add a little bit more depth to the bottom of these arches, so I'm just carving out half of the depth and then trying to kind of bevel the edge back to the top there, so you get a nice little curve. With that done, I'm going to use some PVA glue and glue this one in place. I also use a small amount of hot glue here. Now the thinking here is that the hot glue will grab it and tack it in place temporarily, and then the PVA glue will give it a much stronger bond in the long term, especially when you're dealing with very fine small pieces like the bottoms of these battlements. Pins are a really good way of holding things in place to make sure that they don't move as they dry as well. And I'm trying to place the pins in spots where it won't be as noticeable when we come to actually paint the model itself. Now we're ready to glue all of the wall together. Here I'm just using hot glue because there's a lot of surface area, and the hot glue in my experience is good enough to actually hold these big pieces of foam together. I repeat the process on the larger piece here and stick them in place. Now I can glue both the bottom and the top half of that wall together, making sure to rotate that one around onto a flat surface so that they are gluing as close to straight as possible. And here you can see the finished wall glued together. The line between the bottom and the top half is a little bit prevalent, but that will become less obvious when we actually come to paint it. And here we go, the two walls that I've been working on fit perfectly in with that original gatehouse that we built a few episodes ago. I'm super happy with how these actually integrate. But of course, I am trying to recreate everything from the old Ruin of Arnor supplement. And so it's time to just double check and see what they did in that book. Yeah, they've got the ruined walls there. Perfect, perfect. Hold on. What's this corner tower?
Well, what orders from Mordor, my lord? What does the Eye command?
We have work to do.
Three days later.
So yeah, I went back and I built another tower. If you want to know how I built this, go and check out the Gatehouse video where I cover this in a bit more detail. The only difference here is that obviously we've cut a big chunk out, and in order to fill that in, I'm going to use a bit of scrunched up foil. To cover over that, I've got some modeling compound and I'm just smearing this all into that crevice to make sure that it's all covered up and looks a little bit more ruined and rubbly. Whilst that was wet, I did come in with some foam bricks and just depress those in to make it look like this has all collapsed inside the tower. And then I also put together the very top of the tower, the crenellations. Again, a lot of the techniques I used here are very similar to the ones I used on the ruined gatehouse build in terms of the timber framing and the crenellations. So go back and check out that video. Now it's time to make these walls feel a little bit more ruined and a little bit more as if they're sitting within their environment. So again, I go to my homemade modeling compound. I spread this around the base of the wall where obviously collapsed masonry would be, but I'm also spreading some on the midpoints of the walls just to again try and break up the monotony of it all being stonework. Sometimes I find actually using a brush to smooth out the modeling compound is a bit easier than using your fingers. I don't know if that's the case for Sculptamold, but for my homemade version, it's a little bit easier to feather out the edge with the brush. I want to keep as much volume on this modeling compound, but at the same time, I want to have a nice clean edge around it. Then again, I come back in with the individual textured foam bricks and I'm just pressing these in randomly throughout to give the idea that this ruined wall has collapsed. So here we go, we're ready for painting. I'm super happy with how these pieces have turned out in terms of the level of detail, the playability for models to interact with the different levels, but still keeping that element of realism with the amount of rubble and strewn brickwork around the bases. We've covered the painting before and it's exactly the same as previous videos. A brown Mod Podge mix gives us a base coat, then we airbrush with grey, followed by successive dry brushes with greys up to a pure cream. If you want to have more details on this technique, then go back to one of my previous videos for more details. My favourite part of the painting process is the weathering. Plenty of other crafters talk about painting individual bricks and then washing and then dry brushing up. I really prefer to dry brush everything grey and then come back in with these dark greeny brown tones to really give a more weathered and textured appearance. This for me gives enough variation on the stonework and creates a really nice weathered and worn look. I I also use a paintbrush just to try and reinforce some of these drip lines. If you're interested in the ground cover that I use, here's the recipes for both of the ground covers that I've covered in previous videos. Once a layer of PVA is down, I just go backwards and forwards between these two different types of ground covers to give me a really nice varied finish. And then it's on to the flocking. These are the flocks that I like to use for these Arnor pieces. It gives a really nice blend and kind of autumnal feel to the whole pieces. Again, it's just about sporadically adding in glue where we want the green flock to sit, leaving some of that base material showing through to give a nice varied feel. Again, it's all about blending between the different colors. I like to go back and forth between the mid-greens, the light greens, some of the yellow tones, and really establish quite a varied set of ground cover. This yellow flock from Geek Gaming Scenics has a tendency sometimes to turn a bit reddy brown, and that's fine because I actually really like that look once the glue hits it. It does darken up quite a bit, and I like that finish. Here I'm just using some isopropyl alcohol, and then I come back over with some watered down PVA and establish where I'm going to put the leaf scatter. Again, it's about building up those different layers, and by doing this leaf scatter over the top, it really creates quite a believable look and feel to the piece. I'm really concentrating around the edges of the ruined wall here where the leaves would be gathered up and come to rest. Then I apply my clump foliage. Again, wherever I feel like some small bushes would start to grow out of these cracks of the fallen rubble and masonry. And also this is a great way to hide any mistakes that you've made in previous stages. If there's a part that you missed with some ground cover or missed painting properly, you can always hide your sins. Finally, we come in with my favorite part, the grass tufts. That means that we are almost at the end. So, with the main build done, the only thing left is to test out the modularity, and I am happy to say that these pieces work really, really well together. Whether it's with the gatehouse or with this corner tower, there are loads of different configurations that you can come up with, and I'm particularly fond of combining all of those pieces together for this one diagonal mega structure. So I thought I would use this as the basis for some of the reveal shots that we've got at the end of the video here. I'm super excited to test this layout with an actual game. Hopefully it won't be too far in the future. And with the new Ruin of Arnor supplement around the corner, I am itching to see what the narrative scenarios look like. Let's have a closer look at how these ruins actually finished up. Whew. Well, that certainly escalated. What was supposed to be a relatively straightforward quick build certainly escalated into something of a mega modular build. I think I've been watching too much Zorp. Anyway, at the start of the video, I mentioned that we were going to do a giveaway for some of these MDF jigs. Now, super simple for you to enter into your chance to win this one. All you've got to do, like the video, make sure you're subscribed, and comment down below which kingdom you would use these jigs for to create your terrain. Would they be for the Kingdom of Gondor, or would they be for the flavor of the month, the Kingdom of Arnor? Now, I'm super pumped that GW has unofficially announced that the next supplement is going to be the Ruin of Arnor. And to celebrate the next video where we announce the winner of this little jig, we're going to do a mega build of all the remaining ruins from the old supplement, Ruin of Arnor. So stay tuned for that one. Until next time, have fun hobbying.